English Literature Revision for Power and Conflict Poetry, the Emigree. Okay, so first of all, some general advice. So don't focus on what you can't do. You're not expected to teach yourself new material. Just go over what you've done before and try and come up with some new revision materials. Use this time to revise and prepare new materials. These will be incredibly useful in Year 11. So think about the things that you're creating at the moment. Can you try and make them very accessible and easy for you to understand when you come back to them before you prepare for your final exam? Set yourself 1 or 2 tasks that you want to achieve and do them. So try and make sure that whatever you start, make sure you try and finish. And also try a variety of different activities. So this could be things which you create yourself on paper or card, etc. And also online resources as well. So try and complete tasks on Seneca, SAM Learning, and also visit BBC Bitesize to consolidate your knowledge of these poems. Okay, and a reminder of the set tasks. So on the Pedmore Shared Area Q Drive, on the Year 10 Home Learning and Year 11 Revision Aids, you had to find a series of resources on PowerPoint and a lot of different types of tasks, both to get you remembering the quotations you need to know, the contextual information, and also some tasks which consider the bigger questions around anthology. So there's those tasks on the Q Drive. Obviously there's SAM Learning, Seneca Learning, and BBC Bitesize as well. And the goal for you is to make sure that concerning each of the 15 poems, you can explain what each of the poems are about, link the poem to different themes and ideas, choose, annotate, and learn 3 or more key quotations, and then translate them onto revision cards. Then let's challenge yourself, try and explore wider reading, for example, the British Library online, and some contextual information about the poet and the time the poem was written in as well. All these things will help you consolidate your knowledge of all the poems and will help you as you come to revise in Year 11. So going on to The Emigree by Carol Rumins. What I'll do is I'll read through the 3 stanzas of the poem in full. I'll make sure that it's very clear, take more time, and then following that I'll go through and make sure that we annotate and recognise some of the key language and devices from within the poem. Okay, so The Emigree. There was once a country, I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight clear, for it seems I never saw it in that November, which, I am told, comes to the mildest city. The worst news I receive of it cannot break my original view, the bright filled paperweight. It may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. The white streets of that city, the graceful slopes, grow even clearer as time rolls its tanks, and the frontiers rise between us, close like waves. That child's vocabulary I carry here, like a hollow doll, opens and spills a grammar. Soon I shall have every coloured molecule of it. It may by now be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes of sunlight. I have no passport. There's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its homeward plain. It's in front of me, docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. My city takes me dancing with the city of us. They accuse me of absence. They circle me. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as it's of sunlight. Okay, so to walk you through some of the important quotations and language of the poem, first of all. Well, if we look at the first line, there was once a country. We've got a very clear ellipsis there, okay, which takes us into a place which seems to be almost like a fairy tale. Okay, there was once a country. It tells us that the person's looking back and they seem to have a nostalgic or positive view of their country. So from the first line, we've read a very clear perspective from the poet's point of view. They're looking back fondly over their childhood and their country. It's not specified which country it is, and it never is at any point. So that tells us that the poem itself is about emigration or migration as a whole, in general. Unless it says, I left it as a child, so it's first person, First person pronoun I tells us that it's a personal experience. I left it as a child, but my memory of it is sunlight clear. That's the first instance we have of sunlight being repeated. We have sunlight in the second line of the first stanza here, and the end of each of the following stanzas. So if we know about the connotations of a word like sunlight, obviously that would lead us to purity, positivity, life, hope, and vitality. So it tells us that the person is always looking back with a positive mindset in terms of their country and their nationality. My memory of it is sunlight clear. Also, it's worth noting here as well, the country is not really given a firm identity itself. If anything, it seems to have been reduced of its identity or stripped of its identity. I left it as a child, my memory of it. It seems very impersonal, which implies that at the moment the poet or the speaker has got a very distant relationship with their country. Perhaps she has not been back since her childhood. For it seems I never saw it in that November, which I am told comes to the mildest city. Okay, lots to talk about here. So initially what strikes us is I am told. Similar to another poem, Check Out My History, we've got a regurgitation of information. Okay, yes, it's in first person, but I am told implies that the information about the country at the moment is very much second hand. So the person may be referring to media reports or broadcast news and television, for example, which I am told comes to the mildest city. And then again, that's reinforced. The worst news I receive of it cannot break my original view. So it seems that the person does not have a first-hand experience of their country right now, and they can only experience what's happening in that country from the news or from the media. And the news is very much received by the speaker. And again, my original view tells us that this view is based with the bright filled paperweight, and the paperweight in this case is a metaphor, isn't it? Because it's symbolising something solid. It makes us think of something which is very fixed and firm. Okay, perhaps something which the poet is thinking, well, it's something I can hang on to, something very solid, a paperweight. Okay, that's what this country is representing for the speaker, something solid and something which will not move, something fixed. And again, bright, just like the word sunlight, connotations of light, life, and positivity, vitality, once again. Okay, just to round off the first stanza, it may be at war, again, it may be sick with tyrants, but I am branded by an impression of sunlight. Lots to discuss here as well. It may be at war, again, it's speculating. The modal verb may tells us that the speaker is not definite. And in fact, that's repeated as well. It may be at war, it may be sick with tyrants. There's not much certainty in the speaker's voice here. It's just very much second-hand information once again. And very clear in that line as well, the penultimate line of the first stanza, it may be sick with tyrants. Obviously, a tyrant would be somebody who is a dictator, harsh ruler. So the country is not being very well led or ruled, indeed. And taking that quotation in isolation as well, you may be sick with tyrants, is personification. The country cannot be sick like a human would be, so therefore the country is personified as being sick. And then finally in this stanza, but I am branded by an impression of light, which rounds us back in to our second line. Despite what happens in this country, or what this person hears about their country, they are still branded, they are still affected by the positivity of their childhood. They cannot be altered. This original view cannot be altered. They will always look back on their country with fondness and with love, which we discuss later in the poem as well. So branded, very important choice there, because it's the idea of something being marked permanently as well. Think about a cow or another animal being branded on a farm, for example. It's something which cannot be removed. That's the connotation of that particular word, I am branded. Obviously, a comparison you may make, obviously depending on the theme of the question, would be check out my history. It's the idea of being blinded or bandaged. This time it's branded. Okay, on to the second stanza. And here we get lots of imagery to do with positivity once again. We get sunlight, But also here we get the white streets, the graceful slopes, and something we can say also is the slopes glowing even clearer as time rolls its tanks. Lots of imagery to do with white and purity at the moment, okay? So again, the poet is reminding us of her positive outlook on this country, the white streets of that city. She can't see any dirt or grime or any sort of poverty on these streets at the moment. She only sees the pure white streets. As time rolls its tanks and the frontiers rise between us. Crucially, tanks and frontiers possibly tell us about conflicts, connotations of military rule. So there's obviously a subtle reference there to the idea that country may now be sick with tyrants. Indeed, it may be at war. Okay, that's referred to in the second stanza here. Close like waves. Again, wave, possibly connotations, something unavoidable, something eternal, which will continue again and again. It will always be under fire from one thing or another. And then back into the idea of youth, innocence, and childhood here into the second stanza. That child's vocabulary I carried here, like a hollow doll, opens and spills a grammar. Really interesting quote here, right in the middle of the poem. The child's vocabulary, again, it's about the memory of being young in this country and up in this place. The child's vocabulary, it could mean her natural language, for example. I carried here, like a hollow doll. Again, hollow doll could represent childhood or innocence or something which is nostalgically valuable in some way. But then it's contradicted in some way. Hollow. Something which is empty. A feeling of sort of empty joy almost. So you could argue that hollow doll could be an oxymoron because it's something which is sort of empty but also valuable at the same time. Okay, perhaps like a bigger or rather a smaller version of the memory of this home country as a whole. Opens and spills a grammar. That would tell me that if we're going back to this word here, vocabulary, if the doll opens and spills, maybe the person can't hide their true language or their true accent, perhaps. They might want to conceal their nationality, but the fact that it opens and spills a grammar tells us that perhaps that's not easy to do. And it's very easy to identify someone who's been in this country or is from this country. So again, the idea of this imagery is telling us about the person's inability to hide who they really are, even if they don't want to. Here we have, soon I shall have every molecule of it. It may by now be a lie, banned by the state, but I can't get it off my tongue. It tastes of sunlight. Interesting enough here, the bottom line of this stanza, I can't get it off my tongue, would suggest that maybe the poet is trying to, again, conceal who they really are or conceal their true language. And they cannot actually avoid letting go who they really are. I can't get it off my tongue would suggest that the person's possibly trying to reject their true nationality or try to hide it. But in this case, they can't. And again, Jura here, very subtle. Jura tells us, okay, this is something you need to look at as a reader, something which is very important. I can't get it off my tongue. It's got a frustration beneath it. And the full stop brings attention to it halfway through the line, the Jura. And then it tastes of sunlight. Again, it's that referral back to the idea of sunlight and purity, the goodness. The poet's almost trying to explain why her memory might have been soured and more negative in the second stanza, but then again it tastes of sunlight. Whatever the poet tries to reject about her country, she cannot fully do it, because this idea of purity and sunlight keeps coming back. And at the end of the second stanza and the end of the third stanza as well. In this case as well, it tastes of sunlight. It's an example of synesthesia. Synesthesia, it's where a person's taste, or a person might taste something which cannot be tasted, or smell something that can't be smelled. In this case, it tastes of sunlight, so it's crossing over the senses. It tastes of sunlight. I have no passport, in the third stanza. There's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plain. Again, we get a proper sense of the narrative here, okay? The person has got some sort of barrier to her own identity. Her identity would normally be given to her in a passport, but in this case, that can't be done. She has no passports. So again, it's about a loss of true identity, whether it's in her own mind or in fact something physical like a passport. There's no way back at all, but my city comes to me in its own white plain. Again, very clear here, my city comes to me. Personification. The city can't get up and move anywhere, but perhaps she's trying to get across the idea that people other than herself have left this home country. And it comes to the place where the speaker is. Okay, so she's not the only person to have left this home country. My city comes to me. So again, personification, playing a really interesting role there. And again, just to remind us, in its own white plain. White, again, a referral to the brightness and the purity of the country. No matter what happens, it will always look like that to the speaker. It lies down in front of me, docile as paper. I comb its hair and love its shining eyes. Again, personification. The country, or a city indeed, having eyes, having hair, it lying down. Okay, seemingly quite curious choices of words here, but again, there's no accidents. The speaker is trying to make us empathise, make us understand the relationship she would have with this city. It's come to life and she can care for it. She can nurture its reputation. Again, a bit of a comparison can be made with poppies here because it's the idea of different textures and things that can be touched. Okay, things which would represent something much bigger, like a life. Towards the end of the poem, we get a bit of a change of attitude. My city takes me dancing through the city. Again, very clear personification. Through the city of walls. Again, caesura. And you can see a bit more caesura towards the end as well. Sentences gets much shorter towards the end. I get out of control. Where at the beginning there was once a country, I left it as a child. The now almost sounds fairy tale-like, and it's sort of positive and controlled. Whereas towards the end, there's a great lack of control, one could say. They accuse me of absence. They circle me into the final three lines. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. If you look at the pronouns alone in these final few lines, we have they accuse me, they circle me, they accuse me, their free city, my city, me, they. It's almost like a conflict. There's a conflict between possibly the people who are in the city and they cannot leave the city. When she tries to return to the city, they are rejecting her. They accuse me of absence, they circle me, and so on. So the end of the poem is very much up to interpretation, but it seems as though there's a real conflict when the speaker thinks of returning to their home city. They accuse me of being dark in their free city. So again, the idea of dark contrasting with the light earlier on. The purity of the city, the white city is rejecting the speaker on the grounds that she is dark indeed. My city hides behind me. They mutter death, and my shadow falls as evidence of sunlight. So again, this time sunlight is much less solid. It's much more of an idea rather than real sunlight itself. Again, you notice from the structure of the novel, in contrast to something like checking out my history, the stanzas are much more controlled. And regardless of the caesura which occurs towards the end of the poem, the stanzas have almost got this sort of narrative feel to them, telling a story. Things are very controlled and slow-paced and much more rigid, almost like this person has a very controlled planning or memory of their own country or city. Whereas checking out my history, for example, is much more fragmented and much more loose, maybe lacking control. Whereas this time, much more positive and in many cases controlled, rigid. Okay, so we've spoken about the language and touched on the structure of the poem as well. This time, again, just like the rest of the poem, rest of the anthology, what you'll be looking to do is size what the poem is all about in full sentences, annotate the poem with points you can remember from your initial study and any responses and ideas you've had from looking in now in this video. Again, you would have seen this poem before, and you would have had one probably interpretation of it and what you think it really means, how you can summarise it. Well, perhaps on second or maybe third reading, your interpretation might change and you might see something else in there. You think, well, perhaps the poem is actually all about this idea. That can easily come out as well, which obviously would allow you to make alternative interpretations when you come to write an exam answer. So once you've done your annotation and summary, you can then choose 3 or 4 quotations, which you'll look at, explode them, obviously look for your word classes, connotations, meaning, then obviously your techniques such as metaphors, similes, and powerful verbs, and so on. Okay, try and find 3 or 4 quotations you can get a lot of detail from. And then I've touched on the structure of the poem and the form, but also a bit of a question here. So can you say anything about the poem's form, how it looks on the page, and the structure? What do you think it could mean? Why is the poet laid out in such a way where there's 3 almost identical length stanzas? Was that on purpose? What was the idea behind it? Is there a possible difference between the 3 stanzas? And then a hint here as well, look at the repetition of sunlight. That is the fact that the name of the country is never really revealed. I wonder if there's any kind of interpretation you may make from that. And also, where do you think this country could be? It's down to the reader's speculation. Okay, and the Emigree as well, to build your knowledge even further, I need to do some contextual research. So try and find exactly what it was that made the poet write about this. That they had to experience immigration themselves or not? Are they making a wide statement about immigration as a whole? And also try and find out the difference between an immigrant and an emigrant. What's the difference? What can life be like for people living under dictatorships, which seems to be the case here, with the line, "You may be sick with tyrants." In order to enhance your knowledge further, you can go to the British Library website and try and find some of the online resources and articles connected to this poem as well to make your knowledge go even further. That will help you get knowledge and marks when you come to write your answers for AO3. Okay, making links. How can this poem connect to other poems? Well, very clear themes. So, idea of identity. So you could touch on things like tissue or kamikaze, maybe checking out my history as well, which I've mentioned. Okay, the idea of identity and having a sense of self, and possibly a sense of self connected to your own country or your own heritage. That comes out in this poem very well. When it comes to an exam question, well, there is a question recommended here concerning identity. So again, it's the idea of the identity of a person and their nationality and their connection to their home country, and whether that changes over time. Well, if you consider something like checking out my history, that would certainly be a big contender for this poem to be compared to, because it's the idea that someone's been detached from their homeland and also their ongoing relationship with their homeland. Okay, so if you were to write an answer for this question, first thing you need to do is obviously choose a poem to compare to, and then think about 3 points from each poem which would go into your response. So 3 points would be connected to a quotation, 1 quotation each, and then once you've written an introduction which deals with the idea of the power of identity, you could then go into writing your exam response. Now your exam response, once you've done the introduction, would be 3 P paragraphs per poem. Now the important thing to remember is that they would alternate. Okay, so let's say if you've done one about checking out my history, then go to the Emigree, and vice versa. So you're making a clear comparison. And don't forget that your paragraphs should have a clear comparative phrase, such as both poems, or on the other hand, whereas, in a similar way, and so on. Those sorts of phrases should go at the start of a paragraph, just so you can show your teacher, examiner, that you're making a clear comparison, because that's one of the key aspects of an essay like this. Once you've done your 3 PA paragraphs for each poem, so 6 in total, then make sure you write a conclusion. So you've got time to do that, and you are summarising the idea of the power of identity, and then judging the most effective methods used by each poet. And you may see that there's some similarities in the methods used as well. You might use the same ones. Here's the mark scheme as well. We've got level 5, level 6 here to start with. Obviously, essay would be sort of 30 marks together. So AO1, 12 marks, those 12 marks AO2, and 6 marks AO3, which is the context of the poem. And the best responses, level 6, would be convincing and critical analysis and exploration. So you're not only just applying methods and saying what their effects could be, you're actually exploring some of the bigger questions as well. What exactly is the poet trying to say about identity, or about their home country, or about emigration as a whole? And how is metaphor, how is imagery, personification being used to express those ideas? Think about how the poet is trying to make a bigger statement than just the words on this page. And then for level 5, think about the criteria for that as well. Thoughtful and developed consideration. The easiest way to find that in an answer is to see, okay, have the keywords in each quotation been fully examined and analysed? Have the key criteria been found, such as subject terminology, have they been explored, and is there a clear explanation as to why those methods have been used? Specs are. Have they been developed, as in individual words being picked apart and all the connotations have been explored fully? That's how we find a developed answer, which is thoughtful and considered. Obviously, there are paragraphs as well. What you need to be doing is making clear comparisons across the anthology, across the 2 poems you've chosen. And if you get above your half mark, so if you get above 15, you get into a clear understanding, that's where you get your pass. So make sure that we're at least making explained comments, which are true. And obviously, it's an easy transition to make into the clear understanding brackets as well. Okay, so a reminder here of the set tasks. So in the shared area, in the Q drive, you can find all sorts of resources, including and one question we found in the 10 Home Learning Year 11 Revision Aids folder. You can see SAM Learning inside and outside school. Same goes for Seneca Learning, and you see Bite Size. At the moment, in terms of your preparation and your revision, you need to be able to briefly explain what each poem is about. Link the poem to other poems, including different themes and ideas. Choose, annotate, and learn 3 or more key quotations, and then transfer them onto revision cards. And then to challenge yourself, try and explore some wider reading. So that includes finding things online, such as the Brit Library, to try and expand your knowledge, the poets' work they've put together for the anthology. And finally, email your teacher as you require, whether it's with any homework or indeed questions and support as well. If you've got a poem which you're not quite sure about, a certain theme or quotation or device which you can't quite get to the bottom of, email your teacher and they'll be able to help you in the first instance.